My name is Alara Vance. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a landscape designer in Portland, Oregon, where the air smells of damp earth and roses. My life is a quiet tapestry woven from the things I love, the patient unfurling of a fern, the precise lines of a blueprint, the warmth of coffee in my hands on a misty morning. But 5 years ago, that tapestry was torn from the loom in a single, silent moment. My life, as I had so carefully planned it, was dismantled by the two people I trusted most, my sister and the man I was going to marry. It's strange how memory holds onto the senses. I can no longer picture the exact pattern on the heirloom china we were setting out for the party, but I can still summon the scent of that evening at my parents' home in Seacrest, Massachusetts. It was a symphony of late summer, the sweet, heavy perfume of honeysuckle climbing the porch trellis, the briny tang of the Atlantic carried on the breeze, and the yeasty aroma of my mother's brioche cooling on the kitchen counter. Our colonial house, a rambling structure of gray shingles and white trim that had weathered over 2 centuries of sea winds, was aglow with the soft light of paper lanterns. Laughter and the clinking of glasses spilled from the backyard into the cooling air. I was floating, suspended in a state of bliss so profound it felt almost fragile, as if a single wrong move might shatter it. This was meant to be the beginning. Julian and I had spent 5 years building a life of shared dreams and quiet understanding. He was a financial analyst, a man of structure and predictability, and I, a woman who found beauty in the wild, organic chaos of nature, had found a calming anchor in his steadiness. He was my safe harbor. In his presence, I felt seen, cherished, and above all, secure. Then came the fracture, a hairline crack that spiderwebbed through the foundation of my world. The evening had grown cool, and the sea breeze raised goosebumps on my arms. I'd slipped back inside to find the cashmere wrap I'd left in the study. The main floor of the house was hushed, a brief pause in the festive rhythm as guests mingled in the garden. The old floorboards, worn smooth by generations of footsteps, were cool beneath my bare feet. That's when I heard it. Not words, but the sound of intimacy. A low murmur, a shared secret. And then a laugh, a breathless, private laugh that belonged to my sister, Maya. My stomach coiled into a tight, cold knot. I moved toward the study, a room paneled in dark cherry wood and smelling of old books and lemon polish. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open just enough to see inside, my heart hammering against my ribs with a frantic, primitive rhythm. And there they were. Julian, my fiancé, my anchor. And Maya, my sister, my other half. It wasn't a scene of grand passion. It was something quieter, and for that reason, more devastating. He was standing behind her as she looked at a book on the shelf, his hand resting on the small of her back, his thumb drawing slow, idle circles. Her head was tilted back, resting against his shoulder. They were whispering, their faces so close their breath must have mingled. The gesture was so casual, so deeply familiar, that it hollowed me out. It spoke of 1,000 other moments just like it, moments I had never seen, moments that had been happening in a world parallel to my own. They didn't see me. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, a ghost in my own home, watching the 2 pillars of my life crumble into dust. In that frozen eternity, every small, unsettling moment from the past few weeks coalesced into a terrible, undeniable truth. The way Maya's hand would linger on his arm a second too long. The inside jokes they shared that I was never privy to. The charged glances across the dinner table that I had dismissed as my own insecurity. I had gathered all these tiny shards of betrayal and convinced myself they were just pieces of a normal, loving family dynamic. I had told myself that trust was an act of will, a choice to believe the best, even when your instincts screamed otherwise. When Julian finally turned his head, his gaze met mine. His expression wasn't one of shock or even guilt. It was something far worse, resignation mixed with a faint, weary annoyance, as if I had interrupted something I had no right to witness. Maya simply straightened up, her face a mask of cool composure. She didn't gasp. She didn't apologize. She just watched me, her eyes unreadable. The silence in that room was a living thing. It was heavier than any shout, more cutting than any accusation. In that silence, I heard the sound of my future breaking. If you had asked me then, standing on that porch as the laughter of our oblivious guests drifted from the garden, if I believed I could ever be whole again, the answer would have been a raw, unequivocal no. My hands trembled, not with anger, but with the sheer force of my own dissolution. But that was 5 years ago. And when I walked into that same house for my grandfather's 85th birthday, holding the hand of the man I had actually married, and saw the look on Maya's face as she saw him, I finally understood that some truths are so powerful they need no voice to be heard. They simply arrive. The week leading up to that fateful engagement party had felt like the final, beautiful scenes of a film before the credits roll. I'd flown from Portland to my parents' home in Seacrest, a town that felt suspended in time. The house I grew up in was a sanctuary of memory, the porch swing that groaned with a familiar rhythm, the climbing roses my grandfather had planted, the scent of my mother's baking that clung to the air like a warm embrace. It wasn't a perfect home, but it was mine, a place steeped in the comfort of the known. Maya, of course, was already there. She had a talent for arriving first, for seamlessly integrating herself into the center of any event, invited or not. My younger sister was like a supernova, dazzling, radiant, and impossible to ignore. She moved through the world with an effortless grace that drew people into her orbit. Growing up, we were defined by our differences. I was the quiet one, the observer, lost in books and sketches of gardens. Maya was the vibrant one, the performer, quick with a laugh and a story. People used to say we were two halves of a whole, that we balanced each other. I once believed that. I no longer do. I now understand that some people don't balance you, they simply cast a shadow you learn to live in. In the days before the party, Maya was a whirlwind of surprising efficiency. She consulted with the caterer from Seaside Eats, a local favorite, debated shades of periwinkle blue for the napkins, and even made a special trip to the next town over to procure a specific bottle of aged scotch that Julian favored. I remember standing in the kitchen with my mother, watching Maya on the phone, artfully charming the florist into including extra peonies. "It's so good to have her here," I said, a genuine warmth spreading through my chest. "She's so involved." My mother, who was arranging cheese on a wooden board, gave a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "She's just so excited for you, darling," she said, her voice a little too bright. It was a practiced response, one I would only understand in hindsight as the gentle but firm closing of a door on a topic she refused to explore. I wanted to believe her. I clung to that belief, using it to paper over the cracks that were beginning to appear. But there were moments, dissonant notes in an otherwise perfect melody. A late-night text that would light up Julian's phone, followed by a quick, secretive smile. An offhand comment Maya made about a conversation they'd had, a conversation I knew nothing about. A shared look between them at the dinner table, a fleeting, silent communication that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. I saw it all. I registered every microscopic betrayal, every subtle shift in the emotional atmosphere. But I packed them away, telling myself I was being paranoid, overly sensitive. Maya was naturally flirtatious. It was part of her charm. Julian was simply becoming part of the family, comfortable and at ease. This is what love requires, I reasoned. A leap of faith. The courage to trust, even when your own gut is whispering a warning. The night of the party arrived on a wave of warm, salt-scented air. Our backyard, which sloped gently toward a view of the marshlands, was filled with friends and family. Their laughter mingled with the soft strains of a jazz playlist Maya had curated. I wore a simple, cream-colored linen dress that Julian had once said made me look like I belonged in an old painting. He looked handsome in a crisp blue shirt, a little nervous, which I found endearing. It made the whole thing feel real, momentous. Yet, a thread of unease remained woven through my happiness. Halfway through the evening, as I was helping my mother bring out trays of miniature lemon tarts, I noticed the chill. I had left my pashmina inside, in the study. Excusing myself, I slipped through the bustling kitchen, past the hum of the refrigerator, and into the quiet of the central hallway. And that's when I heard them. The low, intimate voices. The breathy, shared laugh. Maya's laugh. I turned toward the study, and my world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just them. It was the way of them. Julian's hand tracing the line of her spine. Her fingers tangled in the hair at the nape of his neck. Their bodies weren't just close. They were intertwined, two halves of a secret world I had just stumbled into. Time didn't just slow down. It fractured into a million sharp-edged pieces. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I was an unwilling audience to a performance I had no script for. In the few seconds before they noticed me, I felt the full weight of their deception. Every lie I had told myself, every doubt I had suppressed, every silent warning my intuition had fired off, it all fell into place with the cruel, irrefutable clarity of a completed puzzle. When Julian's eyes finally found mine, his face was a canvas of cornered dread. Maya, however, simply blinked, her expression cool and assessing. There was no shame, no apology. There was only the vast, echoing silence of the truth. I backed away, one slow step at a time. The old floorboards, which had creaked under my feet my whole life, were utterly silent now, as if they, too, were holding their breath. Outside, the party was a galaxy of light and sound, unaware that a universe had just imploded within the four walls of the house. I didn't say goodbye. Before the sun rose, casting a pale, pearly light over the Atlantic, I was gone. I packed a single bag, my hands moving with a strange, detached calm. I left a note on the polished surface of the kitchen island, 3 words scrawled on a napkin: I need space. Then I slipped out into the gray, misty morning, leaving the life I thought was mine behind. Back in Portland, my apartment, a charming space in a historic building in the Alphabet District, felt alien. It was no longer a sanctuary, but a museum of a life that was no longer mine. The air was thick with echoes. I took down the photographs of Julian and me hiking at Mount Hood, laughing at a food cart pod, and placed them in a cardboard box. I buried the box in the back of my closet, beneath a pile of winter sweaters. I methodically deleted his number, blocked his email, and muted Maya's name on every social media platform, creating a digital quarantine around my shattered heart. But grief is not so easily contained. It seeped into the small corners of my life. The scent of his favorite coffee beans still lingered in the grinder. I found one of his stray socks behind the laundry basket. The sound of Maya's laugh, which had once been a source of joy, now replayed in my memory with the sharp, cutting edge of betrayal. I told no one. Not my colleagues at Verdant Design Collective, the small, collaborative firm I co-owned. Not the friendly barista at the Daily Grind who knew my order by heart. I built a wall of silence around myself and poured all my broken pieces into my work. I took on the most challenging projects, designing intricate public healing gardens and restorative green spaces for corporate campuses. I worked until my body ached and my mind was too numb to think. Exhaustion became my anesthetic, a shield against the relentless tide of feeling. The seasons turned. The vibrant greens of summer faded into the fiery hues of autumn, which in turn gave way to the quiet gray of a Portland winter. Nearly 8 months had passed since my world had collapsed. One rain-slicked Friday evening, a colleague handed me an invitation to a poetry reading at a small, independent bookstore in the Pearl District, a place called The Last Word. A local poet, a friend of hers, was launching a new collection. My first instinct was to decline, to retreat to the sterile safety of my apartment. But a flicker of something, stubbornness, perhaps, or a deep-seated refusal to let my life shrink any further, propelled me out the door. The bookstore was warm and smelled of paper and brewed tea. People were clustered in small groups, their quiet conversations a soft hum beneath the exposed wooden beams. And that's where I saw him. Leo Sterling. He was standing near a shelf of art books, his hands in the pockets of his worn tweed jacket, his posture relaxed and unassuming. He was a luthier, a maker of guitars and cellos, whom I had met once, briefly. He had been a friend of Julian's from a woodworking class they'd taken years ago, a peripheral figure in my old life. Maya had mentioned him in passing, with the kind of performative admiration she reserved for men she found intriguing, but couldn't easily charm. He saw me before I had a chance to melt into the shadows. His eyes, a warm, clear hazel, held a flicker of recognition. Alara Vance, he said, his voice a low, pleasant baritone. He stepped toward me, a gentle smile touching his lips. I wasn't sure that was you. I wasn't sure either, I managed, the words feeling clumsy in my mouth. I felt like an actor in a play, wearing a costume that didn't quite fit. We talked, not about the past, but about the present. About the poet's surprising use of meter, the absurdly small cups of wine being served, and the simple beauty of a well-made book. He didn't ask about Julian. He didn't mention Maya. He asked what kind of projects I was working on, which Portland Park had the best walking trails, and whether I preferred the quiet of the Japanese garden or the wildness of Forest Park. He asked questions that created space for the person I was now, not the person I had been. He didn't pry. He simply offered his quiet, steady presence. When I left the bookstore that night, I felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't experienced in months. Our connection didn't ignite. It grew, slowly and organically, like a seed taking root in patient soil. We ran into each other a week later at the farmer's market, and he helped me carry a ridiculously oversized pot of basil back to my car. A few days after that, he invited me to see his workshop, a beautiful, light-filled space above a garage that smelled of cedar, varnish, and rosin. I watched, mesmerized, as he planed a piece of maple, his hands moving with a practiced, reverent skill. Our time together was measured in shared cups of tea, long walks under the dripping canopy of the forest, and quiet conversations. With him, I didn't feel like a broken thing in need of fixing. I felt like a person, whole and complex, with a story he was willing to hear whenever I was ready to tell it. And slowly I did. Not in a single, dramatic confession, but in small, hesitant offerings. A shared memory that ended with a flicker of pain. A casual mention of Maya that was heavier than the words themselves. He never pushed for more. He would just listen, his gaze kind and unwavering, and hold the space for my grief to exist without judgment. There were nights I sat in his workshop, listening to the soft scrape of his tools as he worked, the silence between us more comforting than any words. There were mornings he'd leave a thermos of coffee on my doorstep, made exactly how I liked it, with a dash of cardamom. And somewhere in the midst of all that quiet kindness, I discovered that my heart, which I thought had been irrevocably broken, was slowly, patiently, healing itself. I found joy again. Not the bright, loud joy I had once pursued, but a deep, resilient joy that settled in my bones and whispered, "You are safe. You are home." I never called my family. I didn't send birthday cards or holiday greetings. I needed the distance to rebuild myself on my own terms. When Leo and I decided to get married, it was a decision born not of grand romance, but of a profound and quiet partnership. We went to the Multnomah County Courthouse on a Tuesday morning. Our witnesses were two strangers we met in the hallway, an elderly couple who beamed at us as if we were their own grandchildren. I wore a simple navy blue dress. He wore his favorite tweed jacket. The judge who married us was a kind woman with gentle eyes who spoke of love as a garden to be tended. It was small, private, and utterly sacred. Afterward, we walked to a little bakery we loved, the Gilded Spoon, and shared a warm almond croissant, the flaky crumbs dusting our clothes. We laughed, not because it was a fairy tale wedding, but because it was ours, real, imperfect, and wholly our own. Leo never pressured me to tell my family. He understood that my silence wasn't about hiding him, it was about protecting us. Our life together became its own self-contained world, a sanctuary built on a foundation of mutual respect and gentle care. We bought a small craftsman bungalow in the Laurelhurst neighborhood, and I filled the garden with lavender, hellebores, and ferns. Leo filled our home with the warm, resonant sound of his music. We hosted quiet dinners for a small circle of friends who knew me only as Alara, Leo's wife, the landscape designer who could make anything grow. We created something unshakable. And I was, for the first time in my life, deeply, truly, peacefully happy. And then, nearly 3 years into our marriage, the phone rang. It was my grandfather. His voice, once a robust baritone, was thinner now, more fragile. "Ellie," he said, using the childhood nickname no one else was allowed. I'm turning 85 next month. The family's getting together. One dinner, that's all I'm asking. I want all my people in one room. I hesitated, the silence stretching between Massachusetts and Oregon. My grandfather was the only one. The only one who had sent a simple, handwritten card on my birthday each year, with no questions and no demands. The only one who had sent a small, beautiful fountain pen to our P.O. box on our first wedding anniversary, with a note that read, "For writing your own story." No one had told him we were married. He had just known. He always seemed to know. "Okay, Grandpa," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll be there." Leo was watching me as I hung up the phone, his expression full of a concern he never voiced. He simply came over and took my hand. "You don't have to do that, you know," he said softly. "I know," I replied, my fingers curling around his. "But I think I need to. For him. And maybe," I added, surprising myself for me. We decided to go together. I would not walk back into that house alone. Not this time. The drive south from Portland to Seacrest was like traveling back in time. With each mile, the landscape shifted from the lush, green familiarity of the Pacific Northwest to the rocky, salt-sprayed coast of New England. The air grew heavier, thick with memories that clung to me like the humid summer air. By the time we turned onto the familiar, tree-lined street that led to my parents' house, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows, turning the world to gold. The house stood just as I remembered it, a steadfast sentinel against the changing tides. The gray shingles were perhaps a shade paler, the porch swing a little more weathered. But the scent of the sea and the distant cry of gulls were the same. For a terrifying moment, I was 29 again, standing on the precipice of my own destruction, the air crackling with unspoken things. But then Leo's hand found the small of my back, a warm, solid pressure that anchored me to the present. I was not that woman anymore. The reunion was as stilted and awkward as I had anticipated. My mother hugged me, her embrace brief and bird-like. "Elara, you look well," she said, her eyes darting nervously from me to Leo. My father gave a curt nod and immediately turned his attention to the wine he was decanting. It was as if my 5-year absence was an inconvenient piece of furniture they had decided to drape a sheet over and ignore. I was polite, detached, moving through the familiar rooms with the careful grace of a visitor. I was helping my mother place the silverware on the dining table, the heavy silver cool against my skin, when I heard them arrive. The sharp, confident click of high heels on the hardwood floor, followed by the heavier, more hesitant tread of men's dress shoes. I didn't need to turn around. That particular cadence had always announced them, Maya, leading the way, with Julian trailing in her wake like a well-appointed shadow. I didn't turn. I let them come to me. I continued my task, my movements deliberate and calm, placing the last fork beside a linen napkin. Then I straightened my spine, took a quiet breath, and turned to face them. Maya stopped short, her perfectly made-up face registering a flicker of surprise. Julian froze behind her, his eyes wide. He looked diminished. Not just tired, but faded, as if the vibrant colors of his personality had been leached away over time. Maya, ever the performer, recovered instantly. A slow, mocking smile spread across her face. "Well, well," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "Look what the tide washed in. Finally decided to come out of hiding, Ellie." I met her gaze without flinching. "It's good to see you too, Maya." Her eyes flicked down to my bare left hand, then back to my face, a silent, smug confirmation of what she assumed was my solitary life. "Still flying solo, I see," she purred, her voice just loud enough for our parents to hear. "Some of us aren't afraid of commitment." I felt Leo's presence before I saw him. He had been parking the car and was now standing in the archway of the dining room. I allowed a small, genuine smile to touch my lips and tilted my head. "Actually, I'm not." The atmosphere in the room shifted. My mother stopped fussing with the flower arrangement. My father looked up from his wine. "I'm married," I said simply, my voice clear and steady. Maya's smile faltered. For the first time in her life, she looked utterly thrown. Julian's face was a mask of disbelief. "My husband was just parking the car," I added, turning toward the doorway. "He should be here, Annie." And then Leo stepped fully into the room. He wore a simple dark sweater and trousers, but he carried with him an aura of quiet, unshakable confidence. His eyes found mine instantly, a warm, reassuring beacon across the suddenly tense room. He crossed to my side, his movements fluid and graceful, and a small, private smile touched his lips. "Sorry, the street was packed," he murmured, his hand finding mine, his fingers lacing through my own as he brought my hand to his lips for the briefest, most tender kiss. I watched, over the curve of his shoulder, as the color drained from Maya's face. Julian just stared, his mouth slightly agape, as if he were seeing a ghost. Dinner was a masterclass in familial tension. We took our seats, Leo beside me, his hand resting lightly on my thigh under the table, a silent, constant source of strength. My grandfather, seated at the head of the table, observed everything with his sharp, intelligent eyes, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. My mother peppered Leo with polite, nervous questions about his work, his family, his life in Portland. My father grunted non-committal responses. But Maya was silent. She picked at her food, her fork scraping against the plate. She kept darting glances at Leo, then at me, then back again, as if trying to solve a complex equation that refused to balance. She was searching for a flaw, a crack in the facade, but there was nothing to find. Our connection wasn't a performance, it was a quiet, solid truth. After the main course, my grandfather slowly got to his feet, raising his wine glass. His hand trembled slightly, but his voice was full of its old warmth. "To family," he said, his eyes sweeping the table before landing on me. "To the ties that bind, and to the courage it takes to retie them when they break. To finding our way home, even when the map is lost." We all raised our glasses. I met his gaze, and he gave me a slow, deliberate wink. The moment was shattered by the sharp tink-tink-tink of a spoon against a glass. Maya was on her feet, a brilliant, brittle smile plastered on her face. "I'd also like to propose a toast," she announced, her voice high and clear. "To my big sister, Alara." My stomach tightened, but I held her gaze. Leo's hand squeezed mine under the table. "It's truly inspiring," she began, her voice dripping with saccharine venom. "To vanish for years without a word and then reappear with a surprise husband. It takes a special kind of courage to live a life built on secrets." Her eyes narrowed, issuing a direct challenge. Before I could respond, Julian's chair scraped loudly against the wooden floor. "Maya, stop," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the tension with surprising force. Maya whipped her head toward him, her eyes flashing with fury. "Excuse me?" He shook his head, a profound weariness in his expression. "Just, don't. Not tonight." "Don't what?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Don't point out how she abandoned her family, how she just shows up here acting like." I said, "That's enough." Julian's voice was sharp now, broken. They stared at each other across the table, and in that moment, the carefully constructed edifice of their life together cracked wide open. What I saw between them wasn't love or even passion. It was a tangled knot of resentment and regret. With a choked sob, Maya threw her napkin onto the table and fled the room, storming out onto the back porch. Julian hesitated for a moment, his face a hollow mask, before following her into the darkness. No one moved. No one spoke. I took a slow sip of my wine, the silence in the room no longer belonging to me, but to them. The rest of the evening passed in a quiet haze. Damien and I helped my grandfather to his favorite armchair by the fire. My mother cleared the table with jerky, agitated movements, avoiding my eyes. As we prepared to leave, she gave me a quick, stiff hug. "I am glad you came, Alara," she whispered, her voice thick with unsaid things. Outside, the air was cool and clean, smelling of salt and damp earth. The porch light cast a golden circle on the driveway. Leo took my hand as we walked to the car. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked back at the house, its windows glowing with warm light. It was a place of so much pain, so much history. But it was just a house. I looked at Leo, his face illuminated by the soft light, and a profound sense of peace washed over me. I am, I said, and the truth of it resonated deep in my soul. For the first time in a very long time, standing here, I really am. We drove away in a comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. The night was dark, but the road ahead was clear. I thought about the life I had lost and the life I had so carefully, so lovingly built. My journey back hadn't been about seeking revenge or proving a point. It was about standing in the place where I had broken and knowing, with every fiber of my being, that I was whole. The past was a place I had visited, but it was no longer where I lived. As Leo's hand found mine in the quiet darkness of the car, I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was already home.